There we go.
We're live.
We are currently live.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of this season of Max and Ben Save the World, a men's mental health podcast.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah, we're glad that you are here, and we want to start off by letting you know that while Max and I are both therapists, this is not a replacement for therapy.
Nope.
Simply a conversation about men and men's mental health and topics that matter to them. Did I miss anything there?
Also, go to therapy.
Also go to therapy. All right. Today, this whole series really that we're doing right now is on how to be a healthy man in all aspects of being healthy. And today's particular episode is how to be a physically healthy man. Well, we talked about mental health in the first episode because as therapists, that's the place that we're largely coming from. And in places where we have to split the hairs on, what lens should we look at a particular issue through, predominantly we're going to come back to looking at it through the lens of what best informs your best mental health. Mm-hmm. And so with that all said, let's talk a little bit about physical health and what that means in the context of being a man, masculinity, how that relates to one's mental health, how that relates to other aspects of health. But just to dive right into it, I think when we talk about physical health and we talk about men, one of the first things that comes up is strength.
Strength, yes. I think that men are often associated with physical strength. And I think that that's something that's kind of inescapable in a way. And I wonder about its relevance in modern society. I think that there's a lot of people who would say you cannot be a man without being physically strong. And there's other people who would say, no, you don't have to be physically strong to be a man or to be masculine. And, I think that people can present as masculine in many different ways. But I'm curious, Ben, what's your opinion on, do you have to be physically strong to be masculine?
Yeah, I wonder about that. One of the first things that comes up when I think about that question is actually, given our last season was about the hero's journey, and we had a whole episode on Lord of the Rings. One of the thoughts that I am drawn to is the character of Theoden in Lord of the Rings, the king who was once wise and physically capable and strong. He's got Grima Wormtongue is whispering in his ear, and he makes him physically frail. And then when we see the Grima's influence is cast out of the kingdom of Rohan, and he's restored to this level of. And I feel like the movies, but as well as the narrative with the book, does create this dichotomy between a physically frail man being this unworthy king of Rohan, and then you have the king of Rohan is returned to his right mind, he's leading the country well, and he is described as this physically imposing figure that is leading the armies, right? He's depicted as this physically capable man. They add color back to his skin, right?
He picks up his sword and is suddenly dangerous.
Yeah, he picks up his sword and is suddenly dangerous, which I think is an example of a place in our culture where, without it being explicitly stated, there is an implicit level that, I think Tolkien does use other places, like the physical stature and relative weakness of the hobbits, to demonstrate that masculinity comes in lots of shapes and forms. I think that narratives like Theoden's are underlying when we talk about these things, or we have the conversations about the fact that in a lot of ways our society informs us as young men that to be a man is to be physically capable, is to be strong, is to be powerful in that way. And I think that in just looking at that question and hearing it from you, kind of had to rack my brain a little bit, because to me, one of the first things in trying to be an advocate for the marginalized, one of the first things that I thought of was, what about the disabled? I think that there's a significant portion of men that would take exception to being told that you have to be physically strong, just because of the ways that being differently abled can demonstrate that.
Yeah, I
Whether
mean
that's
Stephen Hawking
Paralympics.
comes
Yeah,
to mind.
Stephen Hawking
One of
comes
the
on. That's
great,
a good one.
yeah, one of the greatest minds of
Um,
recent eras.
Another that I
Absolutely.
was thinking about was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Actually,
Polio leads to
especially
the free
for
world.
yeah, especially for the '50s era that he was in,
Wow.
an interesting vision of masculinity that we had. Both participated in the pervasive culture's need slash want for him to fake not being in a wheelchair for a long
I
time.
was gonna say there's definitely some kind of like ableism, if you would
Yeah,
say,
yeah, there was
stuff
some
going
ableism around
on
that,
today.
and also famously one of the presidents that was a family man that played with his children, that loved them, and showed that in public. Um, and so, and to me, and in addition to that, also great orator, great politician that created the New Deal, right? And so there's some level of that demonstration of his ability, his power, his his capabilities
Charisma.
and his charisma. He was this interesting enigma for a 1950s man. You know, there aren't too many men famous from the 50s that you could name that are known for going vacationing with their children and making a point of doing that, right? And saying, no, that's something that I'm going to do even while I'm in the White House. Which some
Yeah.
of that was also for him to go receive therapeutic treatment for his polio and his lower legs in the warm springs in Georgia. But
Yep.
um, he is certainly somebody that I thought of. Well, that was a person that was disabled, and I would argue it was strong. And
That people who obviously are not physically strong can have value, even though we will associate strength with masculinity.
yeah,
In ancient Norse philosophy, there's a line in the Havamal that says, "The lame can ride a horse."
Mhm.
Ultimately, yeah, and you can do things if you're differently abled.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you look at all of the sagas; they say the son was strong. This son was strong. That guy's son was strong. Like they're so focused on are the
Mhm.
children are the male children strong? Like
Mhm.
that's the primary
Mhm.
thing that
Well,
they're
and
concerned
even
about.
looking that as far as language has evolved and moved, I think with like you shared with like the sagas, and as well, I think of the Old Testament biblically. Um, there, the like to say a son is strong. We just know that that means that that's a healthy baby that's going to grow up to be a strong man, right? And there's just in our language and the use of the word strong to mean something so complex
Yeah.
as to be physically viable, intellectually capable, right? Uh, Physically demonstrating of that power enough that it's written down and documented somewhere, right? Strong has this literal English meaning of, being able to resist the weight of gravity, right? But it means so much more. We use it to mean vigorous. We use it to mean full of life. We use it to mean so many different things.
Yeah.
Um, I'm fascinated with the way that we use strength. And obviously, strength isn't the only thing about physicality or physical health that's important, but I think that that's maybe not obvious, and why we have to have conversations like we do today is it can be helpful for us to talk about the fact that sometimes our culture can lie to us. That's not always the most important thing. Being able to pick up the biggest rock is cool sometimes, but it's not always the most important thing in life. So if you were to ask me, is being physically strong a requirement of manhood? I would say no. I would say
Yeah.
that being as vigorous as one can be within their ability, you might be able to get me on that boat.
I think that physical strength is a path to manhood, but I also think that physical strength is an easy path to manhood for
Yeah.
many. Um,
I would also say, in many ways, it's a gift of manhood. Um,
Say more.
in particular, and I think this is why, I think what I'm about to say is also why having comprehensive gender affirming care for people is and access to it is important. Is that one of the things that the puberty of a man often endows him with is a greater level of physical strength. And so I think, like many things that happen to a young man in puberty, and any things that happen to a young man as he develops, there's a double-edged sword to it, right? We become physically stronger faster than our brains are able to reason with what we should do with that strength. And so we need things like society to help us have the conversations that we need to, have outlets for that, and things to do with that. And so I think that it's being a good steward of oneself. If we view the body, which I am suggesting, I guess, today in this podcast that one should, if we view the body as a vehicle and a housing unit for the organ, the brain, that holds our mind together, right, and it supports it, then as good stewards of our body, we have a responsibility to respect and hone and understand that gift of physical strength that we're given naturally. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. What do you think?
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you point out that the effect of testosterone during puberty really gives men strength, that it does in many ways differentiate them from, women or people of other genders. And I think that, it matters, men want to feel strong. I mean, you think about the really old statements such as "you throw like a girl," that are extremely outdated nowadays that people really don't say anymore.
But appraisals of one's physical prowess being tied to gender, like that, very common.
Yeah, they've been very common throughout history.
Yeah.
A man doesn't want to seem feminine in a lot of ways because it's seen as being, quote unquote, weaker. Whereas for the feminist movement, it was actually pretty easy for them to convince, women to be like, yeah, we want you to be able to do what men do, which is like, oh yeah, it's just, even. But, now that men are kind of in this space of, do we need to lower ourselves, like the level of women has been, like a concern, I think, for many men, and it creates a lot of the anxiety around, men going to therapy, men going to the doctor, men doing whatever it has to be. So I do think that, men have strength. It's something that's associated with us. Is it a path for masculinity for many? Yes. Is it a path for all to masculinity? No.
I think it's like many things. It's a tool that should be in a man's toolbox. And I would make a case that it's an important one, that if we're concerned with, again, coming from the lens of a mental health focus, if we're looking at how do we best support our own mental health,
or
physical health is holistic health. Physical health is an important component of that, and right, if somebody is struggling with their mental health, perhaps they're struggling with exacerbated symptoms, not taking care of yourself physically, and that doesn't just mean going to the gym and lifting weights, but taking proper care of yourself, physical hygiene around cleanliness as well as sleep. I would say that sleeping, eating, and doing are the components of physical health broken down, and that those things in and of themselves, there's a worthwhile reward in pursuing them, and the benefits pay interest into the other aspects of health.
I think that all these parts of health are connected. I do think that if you are going to have a really bad time mentally, like you're having a lot of stress at work or in your relationships, or you don't have a lot of social support, that's really going to impact you. It's going to impact your physical health. I think that there's a lot there. Yeah. I guess, so you said what to do when it comes to physical health. You said very much like, activity, like sleep and eating. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, I think that you could break physical health down into the categories of sleep, nutrition, and physical activity. I would gladly see an argument for more. I'm not an expert in that field.
I think that there's a lot of facets there.
Yeah.
I do think that you hit the nail on the head of like these are the three, kind of like things. I will say that, personally, I am a fitness enthusiast. I'm someone who likes to go to the gym 5 days a week, and get like an outdoor workout. I'm a part of S3E here in the Twin Cities. It's it's a good group if you haven't checked them out before. But I do think that the most important thing to me when it comes to developing a routine for your physical health is, are you doing something that you can do consistently, that you can, keep doing the next week and the week after that? Something that's accessible. If the only gym that's accessible to you is like 10 miles away from your home, and that's the only place that you think that you can work out, I mean, might need to find a different plan. Maybe you're going to get some weights at home. Maybe you're going to start running. Maybe you're going to do walking, something like that. And I do think that the consistency is really key, of just like doing something that feels good to you over and over.
Mm-hmm. And I think recognizing as well, I think it's so easy, at least that makes me think of, I think it's so easy, especially in our culture, to be a perfectionist around health. To use a Turner phrase, throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of feeling like either you're doing all or nothing. Either you're eating right, you're tracking all of your calories, your macros, you're going to the gym 3 to 5 days a week, you're doing all of these things, or you're not. And I think that one of the keys to my understanding is that one of the keys to being successful in regards to physical fitness is recognizing that good progress is good progress. And so doing what you can and building upon that is the path to success, and like many disciplines. And so if you're somebody that's out there right now that, I heard it put very well recently, that if you're somebody out there that does need to do a push-up on their knees to get started,
do it.
Go ahead and do it. And if somebody's going to, being worried about that is totally understandable and reasonable and relatable. And if somebody's going to judge you at the gym for using the tool of starting on your knees so that you can one day do a push-up as it's properly done, fuck them. Those people's opinion doesn't matter. You're only measuring against yourself and your own progress and the ability that you have to control what you can.
Yeah, it's you versus you.
Yeah.
I remember, and I'll share a personal story, that when I was first learning to do pull-ups, I was going to a gym that was in my apartment building when I was in my master's program, and I was not able to do pull-ups by default. I didn't really lift weights in high school. It was really something that I discovered when I was kind of like in my 20s, and in order to do a pull-up, I would just jump up and I would hold the bar and I'd pull myself up as far as I could. And I do that for, the 8 to 10 reps or whatever until I could finally do a pull-up, where I was doing other supporting back movements like pull-downs and rows to support that work to happen. But, there was no one in the gym half the time that I was, doing that, and anyone who was in the gym didn't really care. And honestly, now that I, am someone who's, deadlifted 405 in the gym before, I see anyone in the gym and they're, trying their hardest. I think that that's great. And I think that, for the most part, it's us being self-conscious of ourselves, of why didn't I do this yesterday? Why didn't I do this 5 years ago? They're all way ahead of me. And I will say that, unsurprisingly, the gym is going to have a selection bias of people who are fit. People who are fit go to the gym. They're just going to be at the gym. They're going to look differently than the people from the mall. They're going to look differently from the people at the grocery store. They're just people who are going to be a little bit more fit. And you know what? If you feel like you need a space that's particularly inclusive, you can look at Planet Fitness. Although I will say that I think most gyms you'll find are going to be happy that you're just there giving them business, and the gym goers there are going to be like, hell yeah. You're trying to do pull-ups.
I've been going to the gym off and on since I was 15 years old, but regularly for the last couple of years, more weeks than not, I've been in there 3 times a week. And I've never looked at somebody and gone, why are you here? Ever. You know what I mean?
Why would you do that?
Why? I just, literally in my most private of thoughts, I've certainly judged people at the gym. I've never thought, you don't belong here. I've never thought, I've maybe been like, that's not how I would do that. But the biggest thing that I might think is like, fuck yeah, dude. Or I wonder what I'm going to do for my next set.
If someone was doing something unsafe at the gym,
maybe
it's the only situation where I'd be like,
you don't belong here.
So I had a friend, and I had just stepped in when he was doing some deadlifts to coach him on it, and I was worried that he had felt kind of self-conscious about it. But, I do think that I never judge anyone for anything that they're doing at the gym, and they're always welcome there. And okay, when I do judge people at the gym, so now that I'm gonna go back on my words, is if they are not following kind of like gym etiquette
Sure.
situations.
Yes.
Which you don't know gym etiquette if you're there for the first time, and so just
But if you don't know what you're doing at the gym, if you don't know what you're doing at the gym, you're not breaking gym etiquette more often than not, right? It's the people that should know, at least that I'm thinking about. I'm not judging somebody that right? Like you're new to the gym. I feel like it's a really strong sign that this is a new person to the gym. And I feel this because I self-judge a little bit. I wipe down my seat. I wipe down my equipment every single time. It makes me physically revolt to not.
I don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. It makes me feel bad to to the point that I'll leave my water bottle on my machine while I go get the wipe because I don't want somebody else to come take it and then I lose the opportunity to do that. I want to complete my you heard of the shopping cart test?
No. You're the people who returning the shopping cart.
Yeah, returning the shopping cart.
It makes you a good person.
Yeah. I feel like it's that in some ways, but it only matters to me. And so whether or not I complete it. But it as far as being, if you're new to the gym, you're not somebody that's there that's racking your weight on 3 different machines plus a section of the free weights that you've blocked off. That's a guy that's been at the gym too much, that's being a jackass about the gym is full and there's 50 people in here and people are waiting on the tricep extension, but he's got to have both sides of the cable system so that he can do his flies there rather than on the fly machine. That guy is the guy that I'm judging.
There are benefits to using cables over the machine.
100%. But when there are people waiting, I don't think that that matters. Personally matters. I'd make a strong case that I think that if there are people waiting to use just one pulley and you're taking up 2 pulleys, do it at another time.
I think that you can look at those people and you can invite them to work in.
But again,
I think that
all
is
back to our point.
Gym gentleman behavior.
You're not a new person to the gym, right? No, I would say I'm not judging people that are new to the gym doing stuff like that. I'm judging the guy that looks like he lifts weights a lot and he knows that he's being obstructive, and he doesn't care.
So what we just learned is that people say there's no judgment at the gym, and then we learned there is judgment at the gym.
There is. It's just not where you think it is.
So here's what I'm going to tell you: is if you go and Google gym etiquette, and you put your weights back, and you don't curl in the squat rack.
Yep.
And you wipe your seat down. You're doing better than most people.
Yep.
If you are clean in the bathroom, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
For the guys especially, if you're polite to people around you, if you try and make friends, if you efficiently use your sets and don't sit on your phone the whole time, you do those 6 things. I think you're better than 90% of folks at the gym.
Yep.
So, well, maybe not 90%, but you're already in the upper echelon of I'm just doing my business here, trying to get out. When I think about a gym routine that works for me, I do love strength training. I do a push pull legs 3 days, and then I'll do cardio a couple days a week. I will say right now I'm doing a 5-day kind of bro split, but I where you do back, legs, chest, shoulders, arms. No, I'm doing 2 leg days instead of an arm day. That's right. Yeah.
Hell yeah. The memes never skip leg day got to you, huh?
No, I don't skip leg day, but I'm trying to fight some plantar fasciitis, and so I'm really trying to strengthen the posterior chain right now.
Okay.
So yeah, I strength training is a really important part. I think that most guys, they want to look big. And so I think strength training is going to be one of those ways to do that. But other guys don't have the goal of looking big. They have the goal of either being strong or maybe being fast or maybe being lean.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that cardio is really going to be some good bang for your buck in terms of just getting lean. I also think that cardio is if you're running, there's research that suggests that it kind of fixes your gut microbiome. There's all kinds of crazy stuff. Okay, so people we evolved to be physically active, to be lifting a lot, but also to be testing our cardiovascular system kind of all the time, to sprint and try and get prey with our, caveman spears and whatever, and just sprint away from the saber-toothed tigers, I guess.
Long distance running to pursue prey when it falls tired, and sprinting short, fast twitch muscles for getting away from predators.
Yeah. So, good. Thank you. But, we're designed to be on our feet all day. And, of course, we're two guys sitting in an office here at, 7:30 p.m. And, people, we're designed to, move around. And I do think that there is a lot of value to physical activity, even though just a little bit ago I was like, I don't think you have to be physically active to, be masculine. But I also think that it's not a masculine thing. I think it's also just a human being thing that if you're physically active, you're probably going to be feeling better. And I do see one of the approaches I take in therapy is kind of like a Gestalt approach where, and I've grown into this a little bit as I've got older as a therapist, where people are kind of like the parts of a whole. And, we talked about, ways you can be mentally healthy last week. And I do think that the physical is an important pillar of I will feel good about myself. If, I can look in the mirror and I like what I see, but also your body operates better if you're being physically active in so many ways.
We also know that example. We know from research that going to the gym and doing something physical and looking at yourself in the mirror, it's easier to have a high appraisal of yourself after you've done something like that. Yeah. And as well, it does. We've got all sorts of research on the endorphins releases, the extra uptake of oxytocin that comes along with, people call it runner's high, but you get it from lifting, you get it from just about any physical activity. Doing stuff feels good. And to couple that a little bit with what you just said there as well about masculinity being related to it, I think that on this podcast, we want to be a podcast that celebrates masculinity. The word masculinity, especially in popular culture nowadays, gets the word toxic thrown in front of it so often that that we forget to take a moment to just appreciate masculinity for what it is. And if you want to go to the gym because you want to be a tougher looking guy for no other reason than that's the masculine thing that you want to do, that's fucking awesome. Do that, dude. That's really cool.
Well, I go to the gym because I want to be a therapist hero.
There we go.
Right? I'm trying to think of another word they can put on that Magic the Gathering card. But,
I want therapist hero.
Dr. Max, therapist hero.
I like it. Legendary
creature. 1/4.
Yeah. one in a white tap.
We play Magic the Gathering in case you didn't notice. Just putting that out there.
I think we'll get into motivation a bit in the second half. Let's talk a little bit. You shared a little bit of your basic gym routine, but let's say we've got viewers and listeners that are not currently physically active. They're feeling like they would like to increase their physical activity. We've shared a few nuggets of what I think are helpful, and that is just starting is good, and it's okay to be a novice. But just for the people at home, let's maybe share what we are doing. You said that you're doing 5 days a week. You're doing some cardio on those days?
I'm doing 5 days a week in the gym, doing strength training, doing a leg day focused on kind of like a pushing leg movement in the quads more, and then a pulling leg day movement where I'm focusing on hamstrings and glutes a bit more. I'm doing calves 3 days a week because I'm fighting some plantar fasciitis, and I'm really trying to strengthen that area, and it is improving. I'm really glad about that. But because of that, I'm not doing cardio. I'm not running outside, and I actually kind of hate that right now because it's the middle of summer in Minnesota and you kind of want to run outside.
But we're also having that air quality alert.
We're also having air quality alerts in Minnesota, so maybe not a great time to be running outside. So, I'm in the gym 5 days a week, doing, strength. Honestly, if I had my way, I would be adding a sixth day of a run outside or an F3 workout. But I'm just doing 5 days a week in the gym, strength. Right now, and I really like it a lot. Strength training is what motivates me. I don't know. You want to look big, and that's an easy motivator. And honestly, I just feel better when I lift in the morning before work, and that's kind of that.
Yeah.
So,
right now for myself, I go 3 days a week. I try to. When I go to the gym, I typically do. I've been escalating it as I've been going. This is something that we'll get into a bit more later, but I'm recently coming back after not going to the gym for a couple of months. And so I was really expecting to have to do less, and I'm really finding that what I thought was going to be just 5-10 minutes of cardio to start before I start lifting weights was going to be enough, and I'm finding more and more that I have to increase that. But then the 3 days of the week of lifting that I'm doing, I usually have one major lift that I'm doing, one day is typically chest pushing, one day is upper body pulling, and one day is legs. And so I'll do a big principal lift like a deadlift, a chest press, or a squat. And then I try and find 2 or 3 accessories because I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder. I'm just a guy that's trying to do his best. Passive motivation of I want to be able to carry my children in the future someday.
Yeah.
You know?
A reasonable expectation.
Yeah, I have a reasonable expectation around that. Speaking of the gyms and things, though, although this could be about anything, it looks like we do have a chat.
That's wonderful.
I'm going to go ahead and pull that up.
Anyway, so I'll talk a little bit about kind of like healthy eating.
Sounds good.
That. So healthy eating, I think that you are going to have to be the master of your own destiny on that. I will say that carbs just kind of happen is one of my catchphrases, where if you are focusing on just getting high quality protein, which honestly I think a lot of corporations don't really want to feed you because it's more expensive, you'll do pretty good. So just making sure you're getting kind of like 30 grams of protein at like each meal. I think you'll notice some serious gains in the gym that are, you know, a little bit more than just you would get from like lifting alone. Obviously trying to cut out some of those really extra sugars. So if you look on the back of a kind of like a box and you see like, you know, added sugars, you know, maybe don't get that particular cereal, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, I'd say focus on getting enough protein in your diet, and definitely, you know, some green veggies too. But then cutting out some of those added sugars are kind of like the foundation of, yeah, you know, try doing that. And I mean, you probably have a sense of like, I didn't eat well this week. You know, you can make changes there, but also like, you know, when like, yes, I did get Cold Stone on, you know, like this weekend one time, and it was really delicious, and I loved it. And you know what? I still was meeting my weight loss goal this week, so I was happy with that.
Yeah, I think all things in moderation is something that's said all of the time, but is very true.
Yeah.
I think it's important to mention in the healthy eating section here that there are all sorts of resources and information out there that it can be rather inundating of so many different plans, programs, you know, across the history of popular culture and media, especially. There's all these fad diets that come in and out. We're cutting out all carbs. We're cutting out all meats. We're cutting out anything that you can't find outside of the Mediterranean Sea.
We're cutting out everything but meats.
Yeah, we're cutting out everything but meats. We're cutting out all gluten. You know, all of these things, and those genuinely come and go. If you find something that you're riding a wave of popular culture and that's what motivates you, and that's fun and that's working out, more power to you. And if it doesn't work for you, that's totally fine.
Yeah, the thing is that when people are on a diet, they see results because they're following some kind of plan, and they generally know, you know, that pizza's unhealthy and that salads are more healthy.
And ultimately, the data continually comes back to calories in, calories out.
Calories in, calories out, and you know, I think to an extent, macros in, macros out too. So,
but to be fair to a lot of these, you know, the Atkins diet, South Beach diet,
I'm not sure if everyone
Mediterranean
even
diet.
knows what a macro is. You know, a macronutrient like carb, fat, and protein. Sorry about that.
Yeah. A lot of these diets end up having that net result.
Yeah.
Right. Of calories in, calories out. By exchanging that information, you know, the Weight Watchers for a long time was very famous for net carbs being the measure, and as a shorthand, except for some you know exceptions, generally, if you kept within their range of net carbs for the day,
you're doing okay.
You happen to be in your calorie requirement for the day, right?
Because a lot of times the extra carbs were really what people didn't need.
Yeah. We had a chat here about gym and going to the gym, and I think it's worth responding to. Chatter Neverdove says, I like going to the gym, but I frequently convince myself it's easier to not go, or I tell myself I'll go the next day. How do I get the motivation to show up? Where do you get your motivation to leave the house and show up?
I hear that.
Yeah, it's tough. It is.
Yeah. Well, Ben, do you want to take a little bit of this one?
Sure. I think that motivation is something that to me is interesting because I think that it can change, and I think ultimately the like prescriptive thing that we can say in this podcast of two guys that are opining on this and is that you should tolerate your motivation changing. It doesn't have to look the same day in and day out. Your motivation might one day, we gave the example, or maybe we didn't yet, of maybe that your motivation is I want to be physically strong enough that if a fire were to break out in my home, I could pick up my unconscious partner or children or loved ones, and I could take them out of the house. I could physically get them out. Or I could save them from danger. I want to be able to physically defend myself. It might be a motivation that manifests itself a little bit, differently. Maybe the person that's motivated by that fire scenario wants to lift weights, and maybe the person that wants to defend themselves is going to look at a martial arts gym. Maybe you're somebody that wants to see more of the natural beauty of the world, and so checking out rock climbing and hiking. Things like that. And motivation doesn't have to be consistent. Whatever can get you up and moving that day, whatever ounce of motivation you can catch and capture, that's good enough.
Yeah. So I've digested the question a little bit more, and now I have a good answer.
Yeah, that's good.
So I think that when it comes to motivation, what you really need to do is you need to find an exercise that you like, that you actually like doing. And this can be related to the exercise, and it can be related to the things that are not related to the exercise. So it can be the fact that if you go to the gym, you can make a delicious protein shake recipe that you found online that actually is really good. Where you put caramel syrup in like a vanilla protein situation, and it tastes you're just like an ice cream shake. Or maybe it is getting ice cream if you're really trying to get back in the gym, and you just say, yeah, no, my goal is to go to the gym. It's not to eat healthy. The ice cream's still in the diet, so I'm going to do that when I go to the gym, the 3 days a week. It can also be creating community at the gym that you're at. I think that if you're introducing yourself to people there, if you're just chatting up and, having a good time, one of the reasons that F3 has been a really good community for me to be a part of here in the Twin Cities is because it's a lot of guys who, take, health and fitness kind of seriously. And it's nice to be around people who also do that.
And that's another source of motivation that one can find is finding a community.
Yeah. And also, if you're finding that, you're going to the gym, you're trying to do it solo, you don't really like it, maybe it is time to find a group. Maybe you want to look up F3 near you. Maybe you want to go to a yoga class. Maybe you want to go to, like Orange Theory or whatever else. And, I think that it's a great way to meet people. I know we've got the male loneliness epidemic too. And so, that's kind of that situation. But yeah, I think that a lot of it is about, can you do something that makes this not a chore? And I will say that once you kind of start getting going in exercise, you'll be like, wow, this feels good. I like doing this because my body feels better. And so part of it's just kind of getting past the hump of I'm starting this. And so if you go to somewhere consistently, like I go to a particular gym in the mornings, and like I know most of the people that go there at that time, which because I just tend to go at like the same time. And if you're going to the same class at the same time or something at the same time, you're going to be more likely to meet those people. And so I do think that like the road is not like it's not a straight path. But at the same time, you do have to be patient and build some kind of routine that feels sustainable to you.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing in these suggestions that we're both sharing is that you might have to shop around and find the motivation that's right for you.
Yeah.
And that's totally okay. Another one that I thought of, though, while you were mentioning those is a place that I've experienced in my own life. And one that I might revisit at some point in the future or near future is sometimes giving yourself an external motivation of some kind of event, right? There's all sorts of these popular things like the Spartan runs, the mud runs, things like that.
You did the Tough Mudder with me several years ago.
Yeah, a couple years ago we did the Tough Mudder together, and I found myself in the 8-9 months leading up to knowing that was coming, I made myself more than physically capable to do that activity for that day. And it was really fun. And the externally motivating factor of knowing that I'm going to go to this day and I want this day to suck less was good. It was super fun, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I since then did the Spartan trifecta race, which I have
Yeah.
a medal for
Yeah.
up there, and that sucked. That
Yeah.
really sucked. That was so hard. The Spartan race is on another level for
Yeah.
a Tough Mudder, I'll tell you that.
But would you not agree, though, that sometimes introducing an external motivator like that, like knowing that an event or something is coming, is
I
certainly
signed up for
helpful.
it this year because I wanted to do better at it, but then I ended
Mhm.
up canceling it because of the pain that my feet were
Oh,
going through. So,
yeah.
which was really too bad. So I had a friend who did it that I was previously going to go do it with him. But he completed it, and that was good for him. So glad. If you're watching, congratulations. You know who you are. Should we move on to our poorly explained philosophy?
Let me poorly explain some philosophy for you today. Today, I wanted to bring and share with you something that I learned about I learned about in my childhood in one of the physical activities that I engaged in, both as a teenager and as a young adult, and something that, if we're being really honest and ourselves in this therapy podcast thing that we're presenting, to take off the mask of being a presenter for a bit, something that I hope I can get back into a little bit in the near future is martial arts. And martial arts doesn't just physically train you. It mentally trains you. It emotionally trains you. It spiritually trains you in a lot of ways. And one of the fascinating organizations that I found out about in doing martial arts as a kid, and I've revisited their key concepts a few times in my life, is the Hwarang Society, which is from Korea. And existed from the 6th to the 10th century, so long time ago. It was an organization of men. It was kind of in this period of time where social classes were being shaken up. The moving out of the rural and into the cities was resulting in this kind of social merchant class, people that were capable of affording more than just to replant their own fields, but also be able to partake in things like that had previously been more of the high court's domain. Things like poetry, drama, reading, appreciation of the arts, and as well as the development of one physically, outside of military training. And so the Hwarang, which comes from the Chinese for flower youths, was this men's group. It was young men that were, you can take some inference from a name like the Flower Boys, of what they were, but there was this organization of warrior poets. They were young men that were seeking to uplift one another as they studied the advancement of both their mind as well as their bodies. And so they had these five core tenets. And sharing this today, I'm not necessarily saying that Max and Ben Save the World podcast officially stamps all 5 of these as their core tenets of living, but I think it's worth examining the ways that other men have thought about how best to live a life that is fulfilling and healthy and what have you. And so to go through them, the Hwarangdo Code of Conduct or Code of Living starts with the first tenet of having loyalty to one's king. It's very loosely translated from Korean, but it's giving sovereignty to your Lord. And so you can imagine when Christianization shows up in the Sinosphere in the 17 and 1800s, of course that language was also used by Christians to refer to lords religiously, and so the meaning has changed a bit. And that's partially because after the liberation of Korea, the Korean Peninsula, from Japan, in the early 50s, late 40s, a lot of Korean identity interests developed, and the Hwarang Society actually really saw a popular pop culture revival. A lot of places, youth groups, organizations, martial arts schools in Korea started naming themselves the Hwarangdo, which means the way of Hwarang, society or organizations, because it was it was tied to this view of nationalistic identity, especially for a culture that had recently liberated themselves from outside occupation. Yeah. So loyalty to one's king. The next tenet is obedience to one's elders. The translation that's used, the wording that's used, this would be a general catch-all for both your teachers and instructors as well as your parents. It's it comes from this Confucian idea of the familial
elders are more wise
piety.
than you.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you should listen to them.
Yeah, and then the next one is incredibly difficult to translate from Korean because we kind of don't have the same words to say it in both the forwards and the backwards between one another, but it's a prescriptive statement that there should be trust among friends, and so you should be a trusting friend, and you should be worthy of being trusted.
Yeah.
Right? Be a trustworthy friend would be a great way of translating that succinctly. Number 4 is never retreat from battle, which I think is very interesting, and I would want to pause on for a moment and give an example of. I mean, this is philosophy from the 6th to the 10th century. This is 1,000-year-old document of men saying the best thing that a man can do, or at least the 4th best thing that a man can do, is never retreat from battle. And I think that as we've had more conversations in modern times recently, as we've talked about the ways that masculinity and masculine culture has been damaging or can be damaging to young men in our society, is sometimes having this almost foolhardy attitude towards a man never retreats, he never backs down. I think that best interpreted, this tenet is viewed as if one were to need to retreat, right, one would recognize that they are losing the battle but not the war. It's not a, if a guy pulls a gun on you, you should charge him and run at him. It's a code that is expressing the concept that one shouldn't give up. Have an indomitable spirit.
And I wonder if that too refers to you're not retreating unless you're ordered to retreat.
Yeah. Yes, which would go all the way back up to respecting our elders and fealty to our king, right? But in a lot of ways, these tenets survive underground, especially with Japanese occupation of the Korean Peninsula. Korean identity and culture is practiced within the home outside of the view of Japanese occupants. And so these tenets are surviving despite a culture being occupied completely. And so I think the message rings truer, especially for a people that are awaiting or actively working on their own liberation. I think that phrase hits a little bit different, right? It maybe better translated or better applied to our modern living is know when to retreat and recognize that not to give up, right? And then the final one is never take a life outside of justice, and so or never take a life in anger, and
vengeance.
Yeah, vengeance. It's a prescription against vengeance. I think it's coming from as well. It's a group of people. It's warrior philosophers that are getting together, and they know that they're forming a men's group for young men. Again, 1,000 years ago, we're not even at gunpowder or anything like that yet. They know that they're training the generals and community leaders of their region, and as they're developing a formalized process of this, they're including that one should not take a life unless it is just. And in a lot of ways that extends, I can tell you from my personal experience, that ends up meaning when you're learning martial arts to a martial artist in a modern society today, that means that martial arts should be used for self-defense. You hear that all the time. It almost becomes a cliche, but it's very true. Almost every reputable, it's a joke or it's almost to the level of camp or a joke in the Karate Kid movies that the Cobra Kai, their philosophy, they don't use it for self-defense. They use it to get what they want out of the world. And the reason that we have to have narratives like that is people would misuse any sort of advantage that they're giving against one another if we don't temper it with the understanding that we must use it carefully and appropriately.
That's why I like the hero's journey, and that's why sometimes I have trouble with the Joker movies, and the movies, being so much in the spotlight. But I like these tenets. I think they're really interesting, and it makes me go back to the place of if this is prescriptive, are all men really supposed to do this? Are they supposed to go through the situation where they get together with other men and they bond through physical activity, and that's what men are supposed to do? And if you don't do that, there's something wrong with you. I don't know. I feel like when I think about men who aren't feeling well today, there's kind of like one of two things going on. One, they may not feel confident about themselves for one reason or another, and they have to develop some kind of sense of competence, which I do think that, training the mind and the body would help, go through. And then I think there's another type of man who is also not feeling good about himself, but is not appearing that way. He's very much going out and saying, I'm confident. I know exactly what's going on. I'm never wrong. And that ends up in sometimes abusive behaviors. I don't know. I think it's interesting because I do think that men need each other is the thing that I always come back from situations like that. And I think that they can definitely use each other in, kind of like the physical fitness sort of situations. But they can also do it in, academic, collegial situations. And I appreciate that this group of men wanted to be warrior scholars and they wanted to be truly balanced people, because I do think that people are specializing more and more these days. And even though I'm a therapist, with my PhD and whatever, I still really value time with the guys and getting my workouts in and living a balanced life. And I appreciate that the kind of founders of Taekwondo also valued that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for me, I get hung up on the tenet number one being loyalty to your king. I think that I have a neurodivergent understanding of social hierarchies and human hierarchies and the value of human life that puts me in conflict with automatically with such a across the board statement of swearing fealty to anyone. But I think that I can remove myself from being too pedantic about it and recognize the societal value in the message of, I think I would adjust it to be, having loyalty or fealty to one's local area. Right? We don't have kings in
Community.
We don't have kings in the United States. We don't have kings in Minnesota. The more that we say that without skipping a beat and refusing to acknowledge that some people might want to change that, the more it stays true. We do not have a king in America. We do not have a king in Minnesota. We do not have a king in any of our cities or towns that are here. And so when I was a 12-year-old, right, 14-year-old, that meant loyalty to one's nation, loyalty to one's community. Right, because I think that that's a valuable thing. If we can slide king over to be this intangible meta understanding of the well-being of everyone around us, the sovereignty of the nation that we share as a culture and people and borders that we share, then I can maybe I definitely can get more behind just having a voice of, here's one ethical approach of let's order it by king, elders, friends, never give up, don't kill anybody unless you absolutely have to, is pretty good.
What does king necessarily mean, though? It means an obligation to society.
Yeah.
That a man's obligation is probably to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And, I think about when the national anthem plays at sporting events, and I get a little teary-eyed still, a little bit. It's emotional for me because I do feel loyal to my country no matter what has happened to it and what will continue to happen to it. And I like to think that the way that I operate is always in the best interest of America.
Yeah.
And also, myself in my life, and I'm trying to be my own advocate, but I do think about community a lot of times before I think about myself.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share those.
So let's go back to our main
segment then. One of the things we've got written down there is perhaps there's a case to be made for physical strength in a man being necessary in order for him to protect the weak.
I think that that's something that has been associated with manhood for a long time. I was watching some horror movies this weekend and just some really stereotypical pictures of dads, with baseball bats running across the house trying to find this ghost. And I think that it is a picture that we're pretty familiar with, that there is an expectation that men are supposed to protect the weak somehow. or if he's in a heterosexual relationship, that he's gonna protect the girlfriend or his children.
That's something that I think
a lot
about
of assumptions
with regards to that is how traumatic it can be in the reality of that. Countless men every year in our society encounter the situation of maybe they're mugged at gunpoint or knife point with their significant other, something like that, and they whether it's their significant other or just something within themselves that's responding to what our society has built for them as a picture of what a man should do, they end up feeling as though this is all my fault, or it becomes incredibly traumatic to live through the experience of being made physically incapable of defending one's loved ones.
Yeah.
And I mean you got a recipe
difficult.
for a good horror movie right there. If explored to its extreme, that concept, being incapable of defending loved ones is terrifying for a lot of men.
Yeah.
That concept, and so
the helplessness.
What can you do about it?
At the same time, it's going to depend on that person's lens of masculinity, because people grow up in different worlds where roles are different and things are. I don't know. It's. I think that we kind of have this idea of I have to go to the gym to protect my family, and to be real, it's me and the cat at home. And, what am I?
Ain't nobody gonna come mug your cat.
What's even happening?
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. So I think that in the modern day, I do think that men, do want to be strong for good reason, and I do feel like when we talk about the militias that are arming themselves because they have to defend their community, it's kind of look at them and you're like, oh, bruh, is
There's some other conversations we could have about masculinity as well. With regards to specifically arming oneself.
I know that's a whole nother
especially
thing,
in modern society.
I don't know if that's a physical conversation, but I mean, what do you think? Do you think that
it comes
is a
in there?
Thing?
I think it was more of a physical conversation when we were arming ourselves with swords, right? But the great equalizer was made by Smith and Wesson, and then
guns.
That conversation became a bit different, but masculinity has evolved, but not very quickly, right? The generations of men that were only dealing with swords and pikes and spears and axes were a great many more than generations we've spent as men since the invention of the gun.
What is interesting is that I can imagine in order to be a master of a sword, you really had to physically train.
You had to physically be capable.
A meaningful amount, and if you couldn't handle it, you couldn't kind of handle it. It's one thing to stab someone with a knife, but to actually be a a soldier. There's that. But now there's kind of this idea of anyone could just kind of get a gun and then things happen. Which
did both good and bad things to masculinity, I would argue. We could go on for a lot longer about it, and I won't digress too much. But, that great equalizer, as many have called it, changed. Whether or not it was only the people that were wealthy enough to afford training in the art of using a sword or what have you, and did end up becoming, arguably or roughly, there's been all sorts of economic studies on it. A handgun is about the price of a basic sword in medieval Europe today, as it was back then. The cost of having the most commonly available device to defend one's home property by taking life, has relatively been about the same for most of history. But the sheer killing power of a gun compared to a sword has really changed definitions around masculinity, and I think there's some, as I said, there's some good and there's been some bad as a result of that.
Yeah.
But speaking of peak male physical performance, one thing we haven't touched on is the other things that science and development can do to overcome our natural limitations.
Yeah, steroids.
So let's talk about steroids and growth hormones, testosterone, all the things. But
I think that there's a lot out there, and I have a lot of opinions on this. I don't know if every viewer knows, but there's definitely men out there who are going through TRT or testosterone replacement therapy for, having been
A variety of
diagnosed with
things.
low testosterone or whatever. And it is somewhat controversial that, men are taking that to kind of like undo some of their aging process, or for others accelerate
Hmm.
their aging process. And, for many it's seen as if that's just like, a steroid cycle. Um, I will say that where I kind of get stuck is like, if you are online and you are advertising your male body as this is a naturally achievable, realistic thing to look at,
Liver
and
King.
it is not that, which
Yeah.
and it is not just Liver
There's
King.
not just Liver King
There are
for sure.
so many,
Yep.
and the thing is a lot of influencers will actually be fairly open about using steroids, but it's not like on their like top part of their profile, and so I think
It's not in the
that's,
15-second clip that comes up on the
you know,
average
where they
15-year-old boy's For You page. It's in their. It might be on
Yeah.
their page, but it's not a warning at the
And
beginning of every.
I think that there's a lot of companies that are really predatory about that with young men. Like there are very much there's a lot of teenagers who are taking steroids, and there's a lot of teenagers who are taking SARMs, which is
Mhm.
like a near steroid situation. And I think that we've got to a point as a culture where, it's very much like out there. And I think that protecting kids is kind of where I go. Because I think that when you're an adult, you can do what you want to. But I will say that when I see an 18, 25-year-old, be, kind of like juicing, before like their time, I kind of go, oh, maybe you should not
I
do
think
that.
one of the biggest culprits of this is the superhero movie genre. I think
yeah.
in particular, Chris Evans, Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, and not Chris Pine. Who's Star Lord?
Chris Pratt.
Chris Pratt. All three of them on steroids, and all three of them have come around to talking about it more recently. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been around for like 15, almost 20 years now, and for the first 75% of that, it was very much not being expressed to the young boys that were being impressed upon.
Well, it used to be like just like GI Joe was getting bigger,
Yep.
which it was.
It was.
And now we're at the point of okay, now it's really in the movies. It's looking a lot more realistic, and I think that if someone wants to take steroids to and I guess if it's illegal where you are, don't do it if it's illegal.
Yeah.
But it's legal almost everywhere. But anyway, if someone is an adult and they want to do drugs, like they're gonna do drugs. But I think that if we're talking about kids, like I think we need to protect them and also just be realistic. I did recently see the new Superman movie, and it was my impression that I
You
don't
think David Cornsweat's juicing?
I don't think that David
You don't think he
Corns-
was?
I don't think he was.
Okay.
He looked
I
believable.
think Henry Cavill was juicing.
I think that he might have been.
I think Henry Cavill been juicing. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that it's a really difficult conversation and kind of brings up, to me, kind of like this, how do you health max a little bit kind of question,
Yeah.
where some people are so concerned with optimizing their health and they're like, no, my testosterone has to be like here. This is where I want it to be. The maximum level of like normal is here, so I want it to be here.
Yeah.
And, then they start taking, whatever it is. And I think that, the question I would say is it real? Like the ability to maximize your health. And I think that I am someone who, has a lot of anxiety about his health. And I think that I take care of my health pretty good. But I think that there's a point that I get to where I'm just like, nah, I can't. I think that I almost don't say no, but I think my body starts saying, no, you
Yeah.
can't do this anymore. And that's fine when I eventually get to the Easter holiday and I have a cheesecake. Like that's what it is. And I do think that I try really hard to be a healthy person, but I think that it is going to be up to you to decide where those boundaries are. But making healthy choices, stopping, doing drugs, or whatever else, and eating better and going to the gym. Those are all, good things. And I do think that there's very much like a vibe of, I have to eliminate all the microplastics everywhere in my diet. And yeah, sure, I'm switching to glass Tupperwares, and there's a lot of scary things that are out there in terms of environmental toxins, but you can only do, so much. And so, like, take a deep breath, try and be better than yesterday and carry on.
Yeah. I think that's a good message for us to kind of move towards our end on.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, trying to be better than yesterday, I think ultimately is the best that we can hope for. One of the best things that we can hope for or share. I agree with your ideas about drugs, not even just steroids, but using drugs in general. I think people are going to use them. I think that if we accept and acknowledge that people are going to use them, people are going to do what they want and do what people have always done, then to me it's all about harm reduction. It's all about spreading the message of moderation, of understanding your limits, and things like that. I think that personally, when it comes to steroids, I'm of the opinion that there's a time and a place for steroids. There's a reason for steroids, and if you're at the physical training level where the people around you, the health experts around you, are like, yeah, you got to do steroids now because that's where you're at. Who am I to disagree with the health experts all around you?
I don't know if a health expert would do that. I think the doctor would say, don't do that.
Sure.
Well, I think it would be a training person at the gym who would be like, you're at your natural potential. Now it's time to take the plunge.
Yeah, I would actually say my personal opinion is that person is wrong. I think that outside of the context of specific categories of physical performance, like you are an athlete, and you're in a league where performance enhancement is allowed, or you're in the off season and it's allowed in the off season, UFC, right? It's allowed outside of your competition, and it's what you should be doing, and the best medical minds around you are saying that. That's probably when steroids is appropriate. Outside of that, like, I think you're a guy that's just going to the gym and you like work a desk job or not. You work any job, but you're not competing at the highest level of physical human fitness and being monitored by a team of care professionals. No, I don't think that you should do steroids, but I'm not going to stop you. Right?
I think that there's people who want to do that, and to me, I think that that's their agency.
Yeah, I think that's part of your agency, and I would say I personally I would question, why do you feel the need to go there? You don't have something that you're
If you
needing.
look at influencers like the Trent twins, who
Sure.
know are juicing hardcore, and they've made millions of dollars on their influencing, and part of that is the fact that they did steroids. You know, for them, it was a business investment. Are they going to die young? I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. Other contexts, like bodybuilding. If you're legitimately like at the upper levels of the Mr. Olympia contest and shit, there are teams of medical professionals and shit that comes
Any
around.
level.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I'm disagreeing with. I don't think that if you're in the lower levels of those, I think that from what I'm understanding, bodybuilding has a problem with this, in the fact that you essentially kind of do have to start doing it on your own, learning about it, and doing it illegally through the black market before you can get to the level where, you're doing well enough that you can afford or be flown out by sponsorships or something like that to be surrounded in, places that it is legal, or you can get access to quality care that is actually helpful to you. You've got to be successful in bodybuilding before you actually start getting to people that know what they're talking about. And
there's free resources available.
Yeah, but that's a part of that obscurity is part of the natural occurrence of a black market, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, speaking of being better than you were yesterday, Max and Ben Save the World would like to recognize the efforts of Mr. Rogers and his saving of PBS back in the day. Given the recent question around funding for our public radio and broadcasting systems, we just wanted to remind all of you that Mr. Rogers told us that when things are going bad and something is in a crisis, you should look for the helpers. That's all I've got.
That's a nice note to end on.
Yeah. Thanks,
I
everyone.
Think we'll stop there.
Again, if you're struggling with your mental health, this is not a replacement for therapy, but please reach out to resources like Therapy Today. Find a therapist for you. If you're struggling with thoughts of suicide or self-harm, please check out 988.
Psychology Today, Ben.
There you go. Is that all you got?
It's Psychology
What did
Today.
I say?
You said Therapy Today.
Therapy Today. Never mind.
Blooper reel, you guys.
Blooper reel. There you go. Psychology Today. Feel free to call 988 as well, the crisis hotline. There are also specific crisis hotlines for different demographics, such as veterans, things like that. Thank you all. We'll see you in 2 weeks.